Chapter 1. The Day My Family Put Me on Trial. For most of my life, I believed silence was strength, and loyalty was the one language my family still understood. I served my country, sent money home, and told myself that distance was temporary, that love would hold even when everything else changed. But the truth was already shifting beneath my feet, long before I noticed the cracks. While I was halfway across the world defending strangers, the people who shared my blood were quietly rewriting my life behind my back. They erased my name from the home I helped pay for, forged my signature, stole federal veteran funds under my identity, and then stepped into a courtroom to paint me as unstable, dangerous, unfit to belong. I used to think betrayal sounded like shouting. It turns out it sounds like the softest voices you trust most. And the day I finally walked into that courtroom, I was not searching for revenge, but for the truth they never thought I would survive long enough to uncover. I walked into the federal court building in Austin, but the same steady pace I use walking into a briefing room. Shoulders back, chin level, eyes forward. The navy blue of my dress uniform felt heavier than usual, metals glinting under fluorescent lights that made everyone else look washed out and small. My boots clicked on the tile as if marking time. I focused on that sound instead of the dozen pairs of eyes turning toward me. People expect drama from a woman under attack. Tears, shaking hands, maybe a dramatic pause on the threshold. I gave them none of that. My face stayed neutral, the way it had in war rooms and server bunkers and cramped field offices where panic was a luxury. I had learned a long time ago that the person who stays calm owns the room. The clerk directed me to the defense table. I sat, smoothed my skirt, and folded my hands, letting my palms rest flat on the cool surface. Across the aisle, my family occupied the first row behind the plaintiff table, like they were attending a school play. My father in his dark suit, posture stiff and righteous. My mother with her pearls and carefully folded tissue. My younger brother Derek whispering into the ear of his wife Hannah, their heads almost touching as if they were the innocent ones in all of this. The judge entered. Everyone rose. We sat again. My lawyer murmured something about procedure and timing, but his voice blurred into background noise. I already knew the schedule. I already knew the charges. Misuse of family trust funds, undue influence, emotional harm to aging parents. The words had been printed in black ink on white paper, but they still felt surreal, like a glitch in code that did not belong in the system. The plaintiff attorney rose, a tall woman with a smooth, practiced voice and the kind of expression that said she believed every word she was about to say. She began laying out a story that sounded like a warped version of my life. According to her, I had always been distant, always selfish, always chasing promotions and deployments while my family suffered in silence. She spoke about my service as if it were a character flaw. Long absences that supposedly damaged my parents, a demanding career that became convenient proof of emotional instability. She brought up PTSD as if it were a weapon. Late nights, nightmares, difficulty adjusting. The attorney said that Derek and my parents had tried to support me, but that I refused help, that I pushed them away, and then used their guilt to gain control over the family finances. Each sentence landed with clinical precision, like a surgical cut meant to bleed slowly. I kept my gaze on a point just above her shoulder. I did not shake my head. I did not roll my eyes. I did not lean toward my lawyer to whisper angry corrections, even though half of what she said was twisted and the other half was outright fiction. I had faced enemy code that tried to infiltrate systems so quietly you only saw the damage hours later. This felt like that. An attack designed not just to win a case, but to rewrite reality. My mother took the stand first. Seeing her swear to tell the truth made my jaw tighten. She folded her hands in her lap and answered questions in a soft voice that used to comfort me when I was a child. Now it sounded like it belonged to someone else. She spoke about my distance, how I never called enough, how I seemed cold when I came home on leave. She said she worried about my mental state, that I was jumpy, guarded, that sometimes my eyes looked empty. The attorney guided her gently until the conversation turned to money, to the trust my grandparents had set up, to the day I came home between assignments and supposedly pressured them into signing new documents. My mother hesitated only once before saying that she had felt pushed, that I used my rank and my uniform like intimidation. The words stung more than any insult, not because they were true, but because I could hear that she almost believed them now. Say something, a part of me insisted. Object. Shake your head. Look hurt. Instead, I sat still. Silence can be a shield. It can also be a mirror. I wanted the judge to see the contrast between her trembling performance and my stillness. When it was my father's turn, the tone shifted. He spoke with calm disappointment, the kind that carries more weight than anger. He described me as brilliant but unstable, dedicated to work, and indifferent to family. He mentioned the few times I had lost my temper as if they defined years of life. He brought up a night after I returned from a deployment when I had shouted during an argument and knocked a glass off the table. That became proof of volatility, proof that I was not fit to manage anything, least of all their future. Then Derek took the stand and the gaslighting became complete. He leaned into his role easily, the concerned son, the responsible sibling. He told the court that he had stepped in only to protect our parents, that he had noticed irregularities in the family accounts, that he had asked me polite questions and I had shut him out. He said I scared my mother sometimes, that my silence was worse than shouting. There were moments when the urge to speak rose so sharply, it felt like a physical thing in my throat. I swallowed it each time. Let them talk. Let them build their careful little narrative. I knew what came next. The attorney produced a folder of documents and moved closer to the bench. She spoke about property transfers and financial planning, about consolidating assets as my parents aged. She lifted one document higher so the judge could see, and then handed copies to my lawyer and to me. The paper was heavier than it looked. A deed of transfer for the house in San Antonio where I grew up, the house my combat pay helped finish. According to the document, my name had never been on it at all. My eye slid to the signature line anyway. It held my name in neat blue ink,
Except the loop on the R was wrong, and the spacing between my first and last name was too wide. Someone had practiced. Someone had taken time. Someone believed I would stare at that careful forgery and doubt my own memory. A small hum started behind my ribs, the same one I felt when I traced a breach back to its source. I passed the paper to my lawyer with a neutral face and murmured low enough that no one else could hear that the signature did not belong to me. He nodded, jaw tight, and slid the paper back toward himself like it might burn his fingers. While the attorneys argued foundation and relevance, my mind drifted backward without my permission. Not far, just enough to see the pattern the way you see constellations once someone draws the line.
I remembered sitting at a kitchen table in El Paso while my father taught Derek about compound interest and business leverage, speaking in slow, patient tones, while I was told to clear the dishes. I remembered high school award nights, where my perfect grades and early admission to the academy received a polite clap, and Derek's average season on the basketball team earned speeches and photos and shouting pride. I remembered holidays where they paused dinner until he arrived, but never waited for me because my work schedule was always considered optional, even when it was not. It had always been like this. Derek at the center, parents orbiting around him, me on the edge, expected to reappear on cue, useful when needed, invisible when not. I had told myself for years that it was normal, that all families had a golden child and a responsible one, that my distance was a choice, a preference, something I owned. Sitting in that courtroom, watching them dismantle me with straight faces, I finally let myself consider the possibility that I had been wrong. The afternoon wore on. More testimony. A neighbor who claimed I had once ignored my mother in the grocery store, an old family friend who said I had become hard, that the service had changed me in ways that felt unsafe. Every piece another small weight added to the scale. Through it all, I remained quiet. My silence unnerved a few people. I could see it in the way the bailiff glanced at me sometimes, as if waiting for a crack that never appeared. At one point, as the plaintiff attorney collected her notes, the room shifted. A faint scrape of a chair, a breath too close behind me. A man in the gallery, someone I had not noticed before, leaned forward. His voice was low enough that it did not carry to the judge, but clear enough that I heard every word. He told me to stop digging. No name, no explanation, just that quiet warning, soaked in something that felt less like concern and more like threat. By the time I turned my head, his gaze had already slid past me, fixed on the seal on the wall. Clean-shaven, boring hair, an ordinary face that would vanish in any crowd, the kind of man you forget on purpose. Except now, I would not. My lawyer touched my elbow, pulling my focus back as the judge adjourned for the day. Benches creaked. Voices rose in a low buzz. My parents avoided looking at me while they gathered their things. Derek walked out with his arm around Hannah, their heads close, as if they had just survived something terrible together. I stood slowly, letting the numb formality of habit move my body, pick up the folder, smooth the skirt, check the buttons on the jacket, walk down the aisle with measured steps. Civilian observers shifted to let me pass, their eyes heavy with curiosity, sympathy, judgment. It all blended into the same dull pressure. When I pushed open the heavy doors and stepped into the brightness of the hallway, the air felt thinner, as if someone had cracked a window after a long storm. My mind replayed the day in fragments. The forged signature, the careful lies, the man with the forgettable face telling me to stop digging, as if I had been anywhere near the bottom. For a moment, I stood alone in that wide corridor, watching warm white light fall across the flags at the far end. My heart felt strangely calm, the way it did just before a mission started.
Whatever this trial was on paper, I knew one thing with absolute clarity. Something was wrong long before this trial ever began.
Chapter 2. The Quiet Collapse and the First Real Sign of Fraud. The ride from the courthouse to my apartment felt shorter than usual, like the city had shrunk around the story that was already spreading. By the time I stepped out of the rideshare, my phone was buzzing nonstop. Headlines, missed calls, notifications from people I had not heard from in years. I turned the sound off and slipped the phone into my pocket, letting the silence close over it. The first real wave hit that evening. A group chat with Academy friends lit up with messages. At first they were careful. Checking on you. Let us know if you need anything. Then the article started getting shared, and the tone shifted in that tiny, fluorescent way that always gives people away. I watched the dots appear, vanish, reappear as they rewrote their words, as if proximity to me had suddenly become a liability. I typed that I was fine, that it would sort itself out, then closed the app before anyone could answer. The next morning, I stopped by the coffee shop a block from my building. The barista, a kid with a nose ring who usually greeted me with loud stories about his latest band practice, would not quite meet my eyes. He asked how my day was going in a voice that sounded like he was navigating a minefield. Behind me, two women stared at their phones, then glanced up, then back down again. I caught 3 words floating across the space between us. That colonel, lawsuit, family. I left my drink on the counter and walked out before it finished dripping through the filter. My mother called around noon. She did not ask how I was. She did not ask if I had slept. She said my full name in that formal way she used only when she wanted distance. "This is humiliating, Marin," she said. "The neighbors are talking. Your aunt called and asked if you had stolen from us." I stared at the wall, counting the faint cracks in the paint. "I did not steal from you," I said. "You know that." She went quiet for a beat. "People only see what is on the news," she answered. "They see a daughter dragging her parents into court." I told her the trial was not my choice. I told her Derek had filed the lawsuit. She exhaled sharply and said I should have handled things privately. When I asked what things she meant, she changed the subject to church friends and prayer lists. After we hung up, I sat at my table with a legal pad in front of me and wrote down one word: abandoned. Seeing it in ink settled something cold and clear in my chest. It was not new, just suddenly undeniable. The refinance notice arrived that same day, hidden in a stack of forwarded mail from my parents' house. A thick envelope from a bank I did not recognize, addressed to an old mailing address of mine and rerouted twice. I almost tossed it aside. Habit made me open it. The letter inside thanked the Merritt family for completing their refinance in 2019 and attached copies of the new deed for their records. I flipped through the pages, each line of legal text familiar from other cases, but never personal until now. Halfway down the deed, my eyes caught on the ownership section. My parents' names, that was expected. The next line was empty. Where my name had been on the old documents, there was nothing but white space. No transfer explanation, no notation, just absence. On the last page, I found my supposed consent, a signature block with my name beneath it. Except I had not signed anything in 2019. That spring, I had been in Virginia working on a classified project, sleeping in a windowless operations center, and eating cold pizza at 2 in the morning. I would have remembered signing away my share of the house I helped pay off. I called my parents. My father answered. I told him I had received the refinance packet and asked why my name was gone. He paused just long enough to confirm he had heard me clearly. "The bank recommended simplifying things," he said. "Made it easier for us. You're busy. You have your career. You do not need to worry about the paperwork." I asked whether I had not had a legal right to be consulted. He said the lawyer told them it was just a formality. When I pressed about the signature, about the way my name appeared on the bottom line, he went quiet.
That might have been from an earlier document, he finally replied. I wasn't sure whether he was lying to me or lying to himself. I called Derek next. He let it ring almost to voicemail before picking up. What? He said, straight to the point. I asked him when he had known about the refinance. He laughed under his breath. You're really asking about a loan right now with everything going on? I told him my name had been removed. I told him there was a signature that wasn't mine. He said I was making drama out of nothing. You never pay attention to the family stuff anyway. You drop in, you drop out, then you act surprised when we make decisions without you. The words flattened my lungs for a second. I asked if he had signed anything for me. He said I was paranoid, that the trial was already dragging Mom and Dad through the mud, and that I needed to stop looking for conspiracies where there weren't any. Then he hung up. 2 days later, I drove to their subdivision on the north side of town. The house looked smaller than I remembered. Same brick, same cracked walkway, same hydrangeas my mother babied every summer. Inside, the air carried the same mix of coffee and furniture polish, but the warmth I grew up with was gone. I heard voices in the kitchen and stopped in the hallway before they noticed me. Derek was laughing. She didn't even question it in 2019, he said. She signs whatever is shoved under her nose. Hannah answered in a lighter tone. She's always somewhere else, in her head or in some server bunker. You said yourself she barely looks up from her laptop. If you hadn't told me, I would have assumed she didn't care what happened to this place. Derek made a mocking version of my voice, saying that he had missions and deployments and bigger things to worry about than a mortgage. Hannah laughed again, soft and cruel. I stepped into the kitchen doorway. The laughter died instantly. Hannah flushed and reached for a dish that didn't need to be moved. Derek stiffened, then forced a smile so thin it looked painted on. Didn't hear you come in, he said. I looked at both of them and said that was true. They had never heard me come in. They only noticed when I left. My mother entered from the backyard, saw my face, and knew enough to change the subject to iced tea and weather. No one mentioned the refinance document sitting folded in my pocket. Back home that night, I spread the packet on my table and opened my laptop. If my name had been used without my consent once, it could have been used in other places. I logged into a secure federal portal that tracked benefits tied to my Social Security number. The system was slow, as usual. Halfway through the loading circle, my phone vibrated with an unfamiliar number. I almost rejected the call. Old habit made me swipe to answer. A familiar voice came over the line, tired but steady. It was Avery, a former colleague from cyber defense in Virginia. I heard about the case. I also saw something that made my skin crawl. I leaned back in my chair and asked what she had found. There was a pause and the sound of typing in the background. Someone filed for a series of veteran relief grants using your credentials, she said. The applications were logged in early 2020. Financial hardship, disability-related, housing support. My stomach tightened. I told her I had never applied for any grants. She said she knew. The income figures did not match my file. The listed address was my parents' house. The funds, according to the system, had been approved and sent to a credit union I did not recognize. I asked whether she could send me copies. She said she would risk it once, then told me to be careful. Rumors were already circling that someone high up wanted this whole thing written off as a family dispute gone ugly. When we hung up, I sat very still, listening to the quiet hum of my apartment and the faint traffic outside, as if I could hear my life being dragged in opposite directions. The portal finally loaded. The screen confirmed what Avery had said. 3 separate grants attached to my name, each filed within a few months of each other, each citing stress injuries that were real, but disclosed only in my private medical records. Whoever filled out the forms had access to information they should not have had. Amounts sat listed next to each entry. $28,000, $42,000, another $15,000. Not life-changing in Washington, but substantial for anyone who knew how to move money without drawing attention. I downloaded everything into a locked folder and started tracing where the funds had gone after the first deposit. The trail led me through a handful of small banks and one regional holding company I had never heard of, Valion Group Investments. On the surface, it looked like a bland financial firm in Dallas with generic branding and a thin website. Too thin. The kind that exists to satisfy basic regulations rather than attract customers. I dug into federal filings and found one line that made my breath hitch. In late 2020, a single incoming transfer landed in a Valion account tied to a shell company with an Austin mailing address. The amount was $420,000. The origin was listed as Arvos Capital, a European consulting firm whose name I recognized from briefings about suppliers we were advised to watch. Not criminal, at least not officially, but close enough to certain flagged entities that seeing them on my screen felt like ice water down my spine. I stared at the numbers until they blurred. The money that started under my name in veteran programs had disappeared
into the same network that now touched Arvos and Valion. My family had refinanced their house without me. They had removed me from the deed. They had weaponized my service record in court. And somewhere along the way, someone had used my identity as a key to unlock much larger doors. My chest tightened, a small band of pressure that wrapped around my ribs and held. I forced myself to breathe slowly, the way they taught us for panic in hostile environments. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Focus on one detail at a time. A date, a routing number, an address in a part of town I recognized from old maps. The routine steadied me more than comfort could have. This was not just about hurt feelings or family votes whispered in hallways. It was not even just about the house or the trust fund. As I followed the lines of code and cash across the screen, a single realization settled over me with the weight of something that would not be lifted. They were not just taking from me. They were using me for something far bigger. Chapter 3: Following the Money and Finding the Shadow in the Walls. I booked a flight to Montana that same night. Using miles I had been saving for a vacation, I kept telling myself I would take someday. Vacation could wait. Distance could not. The cabin sat 2 hours outside Missoula, near a narrow lake that froze solid most winters and steamed like a wound in summer. I bought it after my second deployment, with combat pay and a quiet panic that one day I would need a place no one else could touch. It was small and plain, cedar on the outside, knotty pine on the inside, the kind of place that looked empty even when you filled it. I arrived just before dusk, hauling 2 duffel bags and a hard case of equipment from the rental trunk. The air smelt like cold water and resin. Snow clung to the shaded edges of the trees, even though spring was already starting in town. I unlocked the door, flipped the breaker, and listened as the cabin came alive around me, the heater groaning, the fridge humming, the silence stretching to make room for it all. I set my primary laptop on the dining table and my encrypted one on the small desk by the window. My life divided into 2 devices, just like it always had, civilian on one side, soldier on the other. I pulled the shades halfway down, enough to block a direct view from the dirt road while still letting in a strip of gray light. The first call I made was to Anha. She answered on the second ring. No greeting, just my name. Marin. It is real, I said. The fraud, the grants, the shell companies. I have documents. I heard keys clicking on her end, the muted echo of some shared workspace in the background. Ana Morales had spent a decade at the National Security Agency before deciding she preferred consulting to bureaucracy. We had worked together on a joint investigation once, long nights tracing money across borders while the rest of the world slept. She had been the one to joke about our little network, Shadowline, people who lived in the gray, as she put it. "Send me what you have," she said. "Use the old channel. I will loop in Miles and Cole if you are sure." I looked around the cabin, the rough beams, the single-framed map on the wall, the empty couch. I was very sure. "Bring them in," I said. I encrypted the refinance documents, the grant applications, the screenshots from the federal portal, and the bank records showing the $420,000 wired from Arvos to Valion. Then I pushed everything through the secure tunnel Anna and I had set up years ago and hoped no one else knew how to see. The video call came an hour later. The connection was not perfect, but I recognized all three faces instantly. Anna with her sharp eyes and hair scraped back like she had forgotten to let it down for the day. Miles in the faded hoodie, a tangle of cords visible behind him that would have given most security officers a stroke. Cole leaning back in a chair somewhere dim, expression relaxed and watchful. "Nice to see you somewhere that is not a bunker," Miles said. "Cabin looks like a catalog for people who enjoy isolation." "It works," I answered. Anna's gaze softened for a half second. "You look tired," she said. "Let us help." We spent the next hours building a map. Miles pulled up mirror copies of the grant systems Avery had flagged and layered them over public records from Texas and federal benefits databases. His screen filled with tiny boxes and lines, the visual language of a mind that never slept. "So," he said after a while, "whoever did this used your service record exactly once to unlock the door. After that, they moved money around using bogus veteran profiles. See this pattern? Same disability wording, same typo in one form title, same misspelled city on two applications." He zoomed in on a cluster of names. Half I recognized faintly as soldiers I had met in passing. The other half were completely fabricated, built from fragments of real identities. Cole spoke for the first time. "This is not random greed. This is structured. Someone tested the water with you, then scaled." His voice carried the calm of someone who had spent his life reading people for a living. Psychological operations had trained him to see motive in small choices. He had once told me that omission was as loud as admission if you knew how to listen. Anna shifted to another window. "Look here," she said. "IP logs tied to the grant submissions. A few from library networks, which is classic cover, but these three sets repeat." She highlighted three addresses, one traced to a home connection in Austin, another to a small counseling office in a strip mall on the south side, and the third to a shared workspace that matched the address of Valion Group's listed office. I didn't need her to tell me what the first two were. My parents' house, Hannah's therapy practice. My throat tightened, but I kept my voice steady. "So they used locations they knew I had ties to," I said. "It would look normal if anyone glanced at it. Daughter back from deployment, staying with family, sister-in-law helping with paperwork." "Not just that," Miles added. "Look at the timestamps. A bunch of these were filed late night Central Time, but one cluster is at 9 in the morning Colorado time on weekdays. That lines up with open hours for the Valion office." He pulled up the Arvos transfer again and traced out several smaller transactions radiating from it, tiny pieces folding back into accounts attached to Lucas's company and Hannah's practice. They had been so careful in court, so polished, yet on paper, in code, in money, they were sloppy. Reused passwords that matched old social media hints,
bank accounts opened at the same branch on the same day, a printer artifact in the corner of a scanned document that matched one I saw a dozen times in old family tax files. While Anna and Miles worked, Cole watched my face. "If you want to know how much your parents are involved," he asked quietly, "because their signatures are all over this. It may not be what you think, but it will not be clean." I swallowed. "I want to see everything," I said. He nodded and pushed a new set of documents into the shared screen. These were scanned pages from loan packets and trust amendments going back 3 years. On each one, my parents had signed under sections labeled Beneficiary Updates, Estate Consolidation, Authorization for Representation. "They told me Derek was just bringing paperwork," my mother had said once, almost offhand. "Packages we had to sign to keep things organized." The signatures here were undeniably theirs. The curves, the slant, the pressure. Not forged, not traced. Real. And above each line, in small print, were clauses that handed broad authority to Velion Group and its agents to manage assets linked to our family trusts. Clauses that would let someone move money without triggering standard alerts as long as the overall balances looked stable. My chest tightened again, but the feeling was different this time, not the raw sting of surprise, the cold settling of pattern. "They may not have read every line," Anna said, not unkindly. "People almost never do, especially if someone they trust tells them where to sign." "They still signed," I said. No one argued. We took a break when the cabin grew dark and my eyes began to blur from the screens. I stepped outside onto the small porch. The night air cut straight through my sweater. Above me, the sky was so full of stars, it looked crowded. My phone buzzed in my hand. Unknown number. Normally, I would have let it go to voicemail. Today, I answered. "Hello?" At first, I thought the line was dead. Then a voice came through, flattened by some cheap distortion app. "Walk away," it said. "This is not your fight." The call ended before I could respond. I stared at the screen until it dimmed, then looked out toward the dirt road. A set of headlights glowed faintly far down the hill, not moving. The outline of a dark vehicle set just beyond the bend where the trees were thickest. It could have belonged to anyone, a hunter, a neighbor, someone checking their map. I watched for a long minute. The car stayed where it was. I went back inside, locked the door, and slid the extra deadbolt into place. Old instincts hummed to life in the back of my skull. I checked the small pistol I kept in the kitchen drawer, not because I expected to use it, but because ritual calmed my nerves. Safety on, full magazine, within reach. That night, I dreamed about the house in San Antonio, not the way it looked when I left for the academy, but earlier, when Derek and I were small. In the dream, I sat on the hallway carpet, back against the wall, listening to our parents in the living room. Praise floated through the doorway. They laughed about Derek's science fair trophy as if it were a Nobel. When my name came up, it was softer, like something fragile they were worried might crack. "She is intense," my father said. "Hard to read. Derek is easier." "Some kids are easier to love," my mother answered. I woke up with those words lodged under my ribs. They had never said them to my face. Maybe they never meant them to be heard at all, but the effect had been the same. In the morning, the car on the road was gone. Tire tracks in the thin snow at the shoulder were the only sign it had been real. I photographed them anyway before they faded in the weak sun, then sent the images to Anna with a short note. Possible surveillance. She replied with the single word. Expected.
Back at the table, we pushed deeper. Miles traced the login pattern from the Valiant network to the grant portal that repeated every Thursday afternoon for 6 months. He cross-referenced that with call records tied to my parents' landline that Avery quietly pulled for us. Each time the pattern showed up, there was a call from Derek within an hour of the submission. They were checking in after each move, Miles said. He is not subtle. Cole highlighted another thread. Rental agreements where Hannah's counseling practice billed session fees to shell companies that matched names on our map. List of supposed veteran patients with identical diagnosis language. Dates overlapping perfectly with Arvo's contract milestones overseas. There is ego here, he said. They are not just hiding. They enjoy how clever they think they are. That is why the patterns are visible. Ego leaves trails. It always had. In code, in money, in people. I printed 3 pages of the cleanest evidence and laid them out on the wood like a new kind of map. Grant numbers, routing codes, signature dates. Each line another step my brother and his wife had taken, believing no one would ever follow. Looking at those papers, with the smell of pine sap drifting faintly through the cracked window and the hum of my laptops in the background, I felt something harden inside me. The abandonment, the public humiliation, the way they had twisted my service into a weapon against me, all of it shifted into something sharper. They were not victims of clever strangers or some faceless organization that had pulled them along. They signed. They laughed in kitchens about how I never paid attention. They stood in court and let a lawyer call me unstable, while the system they helped build siphoned money out of the very community I had spent my life defending. This was not an accident. It was a choice. They did not stumble into this. They walked into it eyes open. Chapter 4. The Confrontation and the Truth They Never Said. I drove back to Austin 2 days later with a folder of printed evidence on the passenger seat and the low, steady ache behind my ribs. Snow still clung to the pines around the cabin when I pulled away, but by the time I reached the city, the air was thick and warm, heavy with exhaust and early summer dust. The house where I grew up looked the same as always. The lawn trimmed, the porch light already on, though it was still afternoon. My hands hesitated on the doorbell for half a second. Then I pressed it. My mother opened the door with the careful smile she used for church visitors and distant cousins. It slipped when she saw the folder in my hand. "Marin," she said, "we were not expecting you." "I know," I answered. "We need to talk." She stepped aside. My father sat at the dining table with a newspaper in glasses he did not actually need for reading. He folded the papers slowly, as if finishing an important paragraph. "You could have called first," he said. "If I had called," I replied, "you would have told me you were busy." I sat across from them and placed the folder on the table, lining it up with the edge, the way I lined up briefing notes. The familiarity of the motion helped keep my hands from shaking. "I am going to show you something," I said. "I am asking you to look at it before you say anything." My mother glanced at my father, then gave a small nod. I slid out the top document, a printout of one of the veteran grant applications, my name at the top, my service number, my deployment dates. I tapped the signature line at the bottom where a neat version of my name curved in ink that was not mine. "This went through in 2020, I said. "I did not write it. I did not sign it." My father frowned. "Then who did?" he asked. I reached for the next page, a bank record showing funds moving from that grant into an account at a credit union, then into a Valiant group account that listed his address and Derek's email as points of contact. Then another sheet, the Arvo's transfer that landed in Valiant and splintered off into Hannah's practice, and 2 shell companies that matched businesses Derek had bragged about at Thanksgiving. My father's jaw tightened. "I do not understand this. It looks complicated." "It is not," I answered. "It is someone who used my identity to pull money out of federal programs for veterans. Then they laundered it through a company tied to this house
and to Derek and Hannah. I traced the logins back to your internet. I traced others to Hannah's office. My mother's hands twisted together in her lap. Derek said it was all legal. He said it was investment, she murmured. There is more, I said. I laid out the refinance papers, their signatures standing in sharp contrast to the forged version of mine. You signed these, I said quietly. You handed over authority to Valian. You let them control the trust. You removed me from the deed. Did you know what you were signing? My mother blinked rapidly, eyes skimming the tiny print, as if it might rewrite itself if she stared hard enough. Derek brought a stack of forms. He said it was to protect us as we got older. Package paperwork. The lawyer talked so fast. We just signed where they told us. My father straightened in his chair. That is what professionals are for. We trusted our son. My chest tightened. You trusted him with my name, I said, with information that should have been protected, with the only thing I own that actually belongs to me. For a long moment, there was only the faint ticking of the kitchen clock. Then my mother lifted her eyes to mine. Whatever softness had been there earlier was gone. Derek stayed. You left. The words landed like a clean shot. No raise in volume, no anger. Just a simple statement of how she had always seen the world. I sent money from every deployment. I helped pay off this house. You were gone. Holidays, birthdays, everything that mattered. We did not know if you would call or even if you were safe. Derek was here. He checked on us. He drove us to appointments. He brought coffee and sat on that couch when your father's blood pressure spiked. Presence matters more than medals, Marin. My father added his piece with the same calm tone he had used on us as kids when he wanted to make a lesson stick. Sometimes you choose the child who stays, he said. I stared at him. For a second, the room blurred, and I was 9 again, listening to them in the next room talk about how Derek was easier. Easier to read, easier to please, easier to love. I nodded slowly. So that is what this is. You chose him, even when he used you, even when he used me. My mother's mouth trembled. He is in trouble, she said. You will ruin him. He did that himself. I am not the one who stole from veterans. I am not the one who moved money in and out of shell companies. I am not the one who stood in court and let a lawyer call my service a sickness. My father pushed his chair back a few inches, wood scraping on tile. That is what you always did see everything like, a mission. Us against them, you against the world. This is family. It is complicated. No, I said quietly. It is actually very simple. What he did is a crime. What you signed enabled it. People I served with had their names used without consent. Their records were pulled, their injuries turned into profit. My voice stayed even. Inside it felt like something thin was tearing slowly, but I did not let it show. I wanted to hear you deny it. I wanted you to tell me you had been lied to, that you did not understand. I think you do understand. You just don't want to lose him. My mother covered her face with her hands. For a moment I thought she might cry. When she dropped them again, her eyes were dry. You were talking about sending your own brother to prison. I am talking about stopping what he is doing, so he cannot keep using people who already gave more than enough. I gathered the papers back into the folder. Neither of them tried to stop me. As I reached the doorway, my father spoke once more. If you go through with this, there is no coming back. I paused with my hand on the frame. There was never a way back, I said softly. I walked out into the hot Texas air and did not look back. That night at my apartment, a knock sounded on the door just after 9. I checked the peephole out of habit. A familiar face stared back. Taller than I remembered, hair a little grayer at the temples, Same steady eyes. Logan Price had been on my first cyber unit, the kind of teammate who never flinched when things went sideways. I opened the door. "You look like someone who forgot what sleep is." So, I brought food that pretends to be healthy. I stepped aside to let him in. "What are you doing here?" I asked. "Anna called. Said you might need an actual human in the room who is not on a screen." We ate box salad at the counter, talking about small things at first. People we used to work with, bases that closed, new software that made some of our old tools look prehistoric. Eventually, the conversation circled back to the only thing it could. "So," he said quietly, "you showed them." "I did," I answered. "How bad was it?" I thought about my mother's voice. "Derek stayed. You left." It was honest. That might be worse. He studied my face. "You holding up?" he asked. "I am upright. That's enough for now." He fell silent for a moment, then nodded. "When command tried to blame that data breach in Germany on you, you didn't flinch. You laid out the logs, the timestamps, the audit trails. You let the truth speak. The same woman is sitting in front of me right now. Nothing about what your family says changes that." The knot in my chest eased just enough for me to breathe more freely. "Thanks," I said. The next morning, an encrypted message from Miles appeared on my screen, with the single line in the subject: "Full trace." We opened a conference call. Anna's camera flickered on, then Miles, then Cole. Miles launched a document that scrolled for pages. "We followed every wire we could," he said. "From Arvos into Valian, from Valian into your family's trusts and Hannah's practice. Total volume is $1.3 million in 3 years. Some of it skimmed from grants tied to your identity, the rest from fake veterans whose info was built off your contacts. Every one of those entries has a corresponding IP log. Many originate from your parents' home network and from Hannah's office." He flipped to another section. "Here are the payments from Arvos labeled consulting. They are routed to a nonprofit Hannah registered last year for mental health outreach. On paper, it looks noble. In reality, the nonprofit has no staff, no public programs, just a mailbox and an account that bleeds money straight into their other entities." Anna added her piece. "We also got camera stills from a contact in Houston. There was a reception at the European Cultural Center 2 months ago. Hannah attended as a guest of the Arvos rep based out of their New York office. They left together for a meeting at the consulate building next door. Officially, it was for a grant discussion. That is what the visitor log says. Unofficially, no one can tell us what was discussed. That will get the attention of anyone who cares about foreign access to defense data." My stomach dropped a little, even though none of it surprised me anymore. Cole stepped in. "If this were only family fraud," he said, "they might shrug it off as ugly but private. With Arvos involved and veterans used as cover, it is not private. This touches national security, whether they meant it to or not." As if on cue, an email alert flashed in the corner of my screen. It was from Derek. No subject, no greeting, just a block of text. "You think you can drag us all through the mud and still walk away clean. If you move forward with whatever you are doing, I will make sure everyone sees what you really are. You are sick, Marin. You always have been. This is your last warning." I read it once, then again, then forwarded it to Anna and my attorney with a short note. Additional evidence of intimidation. No commentary. The words spoke for themselves. Miles smiled without humor. "He just handed you corroboration that he is scared," he said. "Fear makes people messy. Messy people lose." The rest of the day went to organization. Anna built a master index of every document, log, and image. Miles verified digital signatures and hash values so the files would hold up under forensic scrutiny. Cole drafted a narrative summary that stripped out emotion and left only actions and consequences. We were not just trying to expose a scheme. We were building a packet that a federal prosecutor could drop straight into a charging document if they chose. At some point in the middle of it all, Logan refilled my coffee and leaned against the counter. "What is this for you?" he asked quietly. "Underneath everything, what is the goal?" I looked at the evidence spread across my table, pages that represented stolen identities, stolen trust, years of choices. "This is not revenge," I said. "This is protection. For the people they used, for anyone they might go after next, and maybe in some small way for the girl I used to be, who thought home was the safest place she knew." He nodded like that made sense. That evening, Anna called one more time. "We are ready," she said. "I put everything on an encrypted drive. There's a printed index and a written summary. We will send clean copies to your attorney and, if you agree, to a contact at the United States Attorney's Office, but it needs your signature on the chain of custody first." I met her in person at a small office near the federal building downtown. The conference room was bland and windowless, the kind of place where important decisions quietly changed the direction of lives. Anna slid the small black drive across the table along with a single sheet of paper. The heading listed my name, the case number, the description of the contents. At the bottom, there was a blank line. "This is you saying you stand behind everything in here," she said. "I do," I answered. My hand did not shake as I picked up the pen. I wrote my name slowly, each letter steady and clear, then set the pen down and pressed my fingers lightly against the ink as if sealing it. The room was very quiet. For the first time in a long while, the silence did not feel like a threat. It felt like a beginning.
Chapter 5. The Paper, the Reckoning, and What Survives After. The morning of the final hearing felt strangely ordinary. The same fluorescent lights, the same security checkpoint, the same faint smell of coffee and old carpet in the federal building in Austin. I walked through it all in uniform again, the same measured pace, the same straight spine. Inside the courtroom, faces turned toward me like they had the first day, curiosity sharpened now by gossip. My parents sat at the plaintiff table with Derek and Hannah, their attorney in a pale suit standing ready. My mother clutched a folded tissue, even though she had not cried in years. My father's mouth was a hard line. Derek leaned back in his chair as if this were a minor inconvenience. Hannah whispered something to him that made him smile. The judge took the bench, and the room settled. The plaintiff's attorney rose first. She had refined her story since the last hearing. Now it flowed like a narrative she had rehearsed in front of a mirror. She said I became controlling as my career advanced, that my deployments had left me fractured, that I clung to the family trust as if it were a mission objective instead of a support system. She repeated the word unstable more than once, pairing it with stories about raised voices, sleepless nights, and my supposed refusal to seek help. She painted Derek as the dutiful son who had stepped in to protect aging parents from a daughter too consumed by work and pride to see the damage she caused. She described Hannah as a compassionate therapist who had watched in concern as I spiraled. Every sentence was crafted to make me sound like a woman on the edge of losing everything, flailing and dragging her family down in the process. I sat very still and let her talk. There were moments when she glanced at me, perhaps hoping for a twitch of anger or a flash of hurt she could point to as proof. I gave her nothing. My lawyer remained quiet beside me, hands folded. We knew what was coming next. When it was finally our turn, he rose, buttoned his jacket, then looked down at me. "Colonel Merritt would like to address the court herself," he said. The judge nodded. I stood, smoothing my skirt, the weight of the small document folder familiar in my hand. My pulse was steady.
Not because I was not afraid, but because fear had become a background sound, like distant traffic. I stepped to the center of the room. "Your Honor," I said, "I will not take the court's time arguing about whether I am a good daughter or a bad one. That is not something you can measure. What you can measure is what happened on paper and in code." I held up a single sheet of paper. "This document is a certified summary from the federal investigators who have been reviewing financial records associated with my name, with my family's trusts, and with Valion Group investments. It contains a traceable audit of transactions, logins, and applications tied to my identity and to the plaintiffs in this case. The underlying evidence has been verified and preserved. With the court's permission, I would like this to be entered into the record." The judge motioned for the bailiff. I watched the sheet travel from my hand to the bench, small and unimpressive, just ink on paper. The courtroom was so quiet I could hear the faint rustle as he opened it. He began to read. For a moment, nothing changed. His eyes moved steadily down the page. Then, his brow tightened. He read further, lips pressing together, gaze flicking once toward the plaintiff table. He turned the paper over, as if looking for some mistake, then returned to the front. The silence stretched. Finally, he lifted his head. "Bailiff," he said, voice level but sharper than before. "Close the doors. No one enters or leaves this courtroom without my permission." The words dropped into the room like stones. The bailiff blinked, then moved quickly to obey. The doors swung shut with a solid sound, the latch clicking. A murmur rippled through the gallery, then died under the judge's next look. He addressed the plaintiff's attorney first. "Counselor, are you aware of ongoing federal investigations into your client's financial activities concerning veteran benefit programs and foreign consulting entities?" Color drained from her face. "No, Your Honor, I was not." He nodded once, then gestured to the court deputy near the side door. "Please ask the federal agents waiting in chambers to join us." I knew they were there. Anna had told me the night before that the United States Attorney's Office had decided that there was enough in our packet to act. But knowing something privately and watching it unfold in public are two very different things. The side door opened, and 3 agents in plain suits entered. They wore badges at their belts, expressions calm and focused. One carried a thin file. Another already had a pair of handcuffs clipped visibly to his waistband. The judge tapped the paper in front of him. "The court has been provided with a certified audit summary," he said. "According to this document, Mr. Merritt and Ms. Reeves have directed more than $1 million in fraudulent transactions through Valion Group, including funds obtained by misuse of federal veteran benefit programs and identities. Mrs. Merritt and Mr. Merritt Sr., your signatures appear on several authorizations that enabled these activities." My mother made a soft, broken sound. Derek's chair scraped against the floor as he half rose. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "She made that up. She has been obsessed with chasing ghosts for years. You cannot just believe one piece of paper." The lead agent stepped forward. "Mr. Derek Merritt, you are being detained on suspicion of financial fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit crimes against federal benefit programs. Please sit down." Hannah grabbed Derek's arm. "You cannot do this. We have a business. We help people." The agent turned to her. "Miss Hannah Reeves, you are being detained on suspicion of fraudulent billing practices through your counseling practice, including misuse of nonprofit funds and participation in the scheme described in this report." Derek looked at my parents as if expecting them to leap to his defense. My father stared straight ahead, face ashen. My mother's hands shook visibly now. The agents moved with practiced efficiency. They read Derek his rights as they placed the handcuffs on his wrists, then did the same with Hannah. The metal did not clatter like in movies. It clicked, soft, and final. The judge looked to my parents. Given the evidence of repeated signatures on documents that enabled these transfers, you will both remain for questioning and potential charges relating to conspiracy and signature fraud. You are not under arrest at this moment, but you are not free to leave. My mother spoke my name then, barely audible. Marin, she said. Please, say something. I met her eyes. For the first time, I saw not just hurt and anger, but something like fear of herself, of what she had allowed. I walked a few steps closer, not enough to cross any lines the agents might worry about, but close enough that they could hear me clearly. Family is a choice. I was not the one who stopped choosing. Her shoulders sagged. My father closed his eyes just for a moment, like a man who had finally run out of stories to tell himself. The judge turned to address the courtroom as a whole. In light of this new information, the civil claims against Connell Merritt are suspended pending the outcome of the federal investigation. All assets connected to the identified accounts, including those held by Valiant Group, the Merritt Family Trust, and Miss Reeves' nonprofit, are hereby frozen until further order of this court or a federal court with proper jurisdiction. The words washed over me slowly. Suspended, frozen. For the first time since the lawsuit had landed on my doorstep, I was not the one under direct attack. The proceedings shifted quickly after that. The agents escorted Derek and Hannah out through the side door. My parents were led to a separate room for questioning. The gallery buzzed with low voices, then quieted again as the judge made a few final notes and set a follow-up hearing. When he finally dismissed us, people poured out of the benches in a rush. Reporters who had been sitting quietly along the back rose as one, but the agents moved to block them from approaching either table. My lawyer touched my arm. "You did it," he said. "It is not about winning," I replied. "I know, but the truth is out." I walked down the aisle slowly, past faces that tried not to stare too directly, past the spot where the side door had closed behind my family.
At the threshold, I paused and looked back once, not at them, but at the empty plaintiff's table, papers still scattered where they had left them. Outside, the cold hit me harder than I expected. A front had blown through while we were inside. The wind cut down the steps, sharp and clean, carrying the smell of wet concrete and exhaust. For a moment, I just stood there, breathing in air that tasted different, lighter, not sweet, not triumphant, but real. Logan waited near the bottom of the stairs with his hands in his pockets. Anna stood beside him, her expression unreadable, Miles just behind them with the laptop bag slung over his shoulder. "How did it feel?" Miles asked. "Like finishing a mission and realizing the damage is still there," I said. "But at least the shooting stopped." Anna gave a tiny nod. "Federal agents will handle it from here," she said. "You may be called as a witness, but you have done what you needed to do." I looked up at the gray sky, then back at the courthouse doors. I keep thinking about younger me, sitting on that porch. The girl who thought loyalty was enough to make people safe. She deserved better than this. So did the people whose names they used. Logan stepped a little closer. "What survives now?" he asked. I thought about the cabin in Montana, the quiet lake, the files carefully stored on a secure drive. I thought about the veterans who would be contacted and told the truth. I thought about my parents sitting in a small room, facing questions they had never imagined. "I do," I said. "The work I have done.
the people who still know who I am beyond a headline. That is enough to start with. We walked away from the building together, our footsteps echoing on the concrete. I did not know what the next weeks would bring. Charges, hearings, maybe trials that did not involve me as the defendant this time. But as the wind hit my face and the noise of the city wrapped around us, I felt something settle inside my chest. It was not joy. It wasn't even relief in the way people usually mean it. It was the simple, heavy peace that comes when a battle ends and you are still standing. Later that night, alone in my apartment, I sat by the window with the lights off and watched the city move. Cars on the freeway, a couple walking a dog, the quiet life of people who had no idea what had just shifted in one courtroom. I thought about my last words to my mother. Family is a choice. I was not the one who stopped choosing. Pain did not vanish just because justice moved. It sat beside me, familiar and sharp, but it no longer owned the entire room. So I want to ask you something now that you know all of it. The fraud, the betrayal, the way the truth finally cut through the lies. What would you do if the people who hurt you the most were the ones who shared your name? Would you protect them, confront them, or walk away and build something new? I would like to hear your stories, your answers, your own reckonings with loyalty and self-protection. Because sometimes the only way to heal from a war like this is to know we are not facing it alone.